If you're new to our fight for clean water, welcome to the arena. Our community has been engaged in this fight for decades, and we need all the help that we can get. In fact, Florida, our water woes date back to the early days of settlement in our state when explorers found the river of grass and decided that they wanted to tame it to settle there. With that aim in mind, more than 70 years ago, Congress authorized the Central and Southern Florida Project. This misguided plan drained large portions of the Everglades and chopped up Florida's natural ecosystem to create new cities and provide water supply and flood control to the existing towns and drain land for the farms. The result was a disaster that has made clear over 7+ decades that Mother Nature will not be tamed by man. The project established more than 1,000 miles of canals, levees, water control structures, and in turn created the new Everglades agricultural area, carving up nearly 1/3 of the Everglades and designating it as farmland. The plan also dug massive canal from the Everglades headwaters near Disney World straight down to Lake Okeechobee, but nature didn't want to be constrained. As a result, heavy rainfall during Florida's wet times meant that there was far too often more water than this new system could handle. The new canal dumped water into Lake Okeechobee faster than the water managers could get that water out into the Everglades. Taxpayer-funded water storage for Florida's sugar industry in the new Everglades agricultural area meant that water that once flowed freely into the Everglades had nowhere to go once it reached Lake Okeechobee. Now frequently, water levels rose so high on Lake Okeechobee that flooding for communities around the lake became a concern. When that happened, and it happened often, water managers dumped water from Lake Okeechobee into the St. Lucie and the Caloosahatchee estuaries. This water, polluted with agricultural runoff and mixed with Florida's high heat, caused massive damage to the estuaries, killing animals, destroying the environment, and even threatening people's lives. The harmful algal blooms created by the mix of toxicity often test more than 100 times too toxic for human contact based on the Environmental Protection Agency's data. In the 1990s, widespread consensus formed that the Army Corps' attempts to control Florida's environment were a mistake. Republicans and Democrats in Tallahassee and Washington, D.C. came together with a plan to undo the harm that their predecessors had caused. The Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, also known as CERP, was born, signed into law on the same day that the Supreme Court was deciding how hanging chads in Florida would determine the next president of the United States. Florida's Governor, Jeb Bush, celebrated at the White House while his brother awaited his fate down the street at the Supreme Court. This was a monumental accomplishment, a plan to restore, preserve, and protect the South Florida ecosystem. It was the largest hydrologic restoration project ever undertaken in the United States. And then it wasn't. Funding languished. Construction stalled. Political momentum was lost. For the next 15 years, almost no tangible progress was made. But some projects started out, but were not finished. Others never even got off the ground. Martin County, Lee County, Florida Keys, and the Everglades, they continued to suffer. Sugar farm profits soared. 2016 proved to be a turning point, known as the Lost Summer, due to polluted water from Lake Okeechobee being discharged into the St. Lucie and the Caloosahatchee. Our communities were crushed by toxic algal blooms. The guacamole-thick waters created a stench of rotting carcasses that was unavoidable. When you were around it, your clothes would reek of it. It would be coming out of your pores for hours to come. People couldn't go on the water, and businesses were forced to close as a result. Mother Nature was fighting back against 6 decades of abuse. This was the backdrop of my first day in Congress, January 3, 2017. The status quo had failed. It was time for a change, and change things we did.
It is a non-negotiable priority for me that we allow the water in our community, water that used to be so blue that it looked like something out of a postcard, to once again become clean for this generation, for future generations.
Rapidly, we passed a new law to authorize the crown jewel project of CERP, the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir. This project, which had languished as just an idea since CERP was signed into law more than 15 years previous, is essential to moving water out of Lake Okeechobee, cleaning it, and sending it into the Everglades where it is needed. It passed in the State House. We passed it in the U.S. House of Representatives. At the same time, we had a new law mandating a change in the way the Army Corps manages Lake Okeechobee. We weren't going to let them keep managing it in the way that destroyed our estuaries. More water has to flow south so that less water is discharged into the east and west coast. We funded the development of new technology for the large-scale filtration of algal blooms out of water being discharged. We prioritized restoration of the Kissimmee River back to its original state, finally getting rid of the disastrous canal dumping water from Orlando into Lake O. We built huge water reservoirs on both the east and west coast to mitigate the need for harmful discharges. And these weren't just ideas on paper. We finally started breaking ground and completing projects. The Kissimmee River restoration was finished in 2021. Later that same year, the C-44 reservoir on the St. Lucie whirled into action. In 2023, the Army Corps broke ground on the EAA reservoir, and earlier this year, the South Florida Water Management District completed the EAA Reservoir Stormwater Treatment Area, Phase 1 of this critical project. Dozens more projects are already completed or currently underway. Where funding for CERP had been woefully inadequate, averaging just about $50 million per year the decade after CERP was signed into law, today, with our advocacy and our help, annual funding has increased by nearly 10 times. We're on the right path, but more progress is needed, and it's needed fast. For every step forward, there are two more challenges in our path. Right now, the sugar industry is suing the Army Corps of Engineers to force taxpayers to store water for them, for their industry, and the Army Corps is still managing the lake to the sugar industry's benefit instead of for everybody else across Florida. They're keeping the lake artificially high for sugar while the rest of us suffer these discharges. In many regards, the Army Corps remains every bit the rogue, overly bureaucratic and misguided agency that they were when they dug up and destroyed Florida's environment in the first place in the 1940s. When it rains, we still get massive discharges, and these discharges still contain toxins that are unsafe even to breathe. Today, the Army Corps is ignoring Congress's direction to them to do things differently. Left to their own devices, Florida is in trouble. The Corps does not say that they want to fix this issue in totality and actually stop all discharges from coming into our coast. That's not a desire for them. They always want to be able to discharge water into our coast, and it's up to us to stop them. The Everglades is still starving. Our estuaries are suffering. Florida Bay is dying. We must change the way the Army Corps manages Lake Okeechobee to stop toxic discharge. We must build more infrastructure south of the lake to get the Everglades the water that it needs. We must, and we will, and together we will win the fight. Hey everyone, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed the video, please click like and subscribe. I will be back on YouTube with more exclusive content, so stay tuned.